Now, it's really such an honour to be here with you, lovely Alice. I'm going to introduce you, although I think all the audience knows who you are, but let's give it a go. She counts Nigella, Lawson and Yotam Ottolenghi as fans, and probably friends as well. I will say, Alice, that I have had Nigella for dinner, and I've cooked for Ottolenghi.
Oh,
Yeah.
Cheryl.
Yes, I have. Yes, I have. Do you know, can I tell you the Ottolenghi story?
Please.
So he was in Sydney and I was recording a podcast with him at Penguin Random House, not at my house or anything. And my sister sends me a text and says, Ottolenghi's just posted a photo of his breakfast and it looks terrible.
Yep.
I'm like, what's that got to do with me? Okay. And she said, no. Get some kebab out of the freezer, which my mother had made, and cook it up and take it to him. What? You don't take an apple for the teacher, right? I'm like, no, I can't do that. She said, get it out of the freezer and do it. So I always listen to my big sister, and I got the kebab out of the freezer and I cooked them, and I had to make a tzatziki to go with them. And I took them all the way across the bridge to Random House, and he ate every single one of them.
Of course he did, Cheryl. Well, you know, that story resonates because I travelled with Yotam around Australia and New Zealand. We toured together, we were on stage together, we did 14 shows across the two countries.
Did you eat kebab together?
Well, every morning, because we stayed in so many hotels, we had so many hotel buffets.
Yeah.
And some of them were like the picture and some of them were a little bit better. But you can Ottolengify a hotel buffet breakfast. And after those 2 weeks, I'm so much better. You know, we were kind of challenging each other to see how much veg we could spot. You know, I was fishing broccoli out of the fried rice and, you know, finding pickles to garnish with and drizzling it all with the olive oil on the side that was meant to be for the salad. So I think Yotam would absolutely have loved that you cooked for him. And in my experience, chefs and cooks and food writers don't care what you serve up as long as you've cooked it. You know, because especially when you're on the road,
that's really
it's actually really easy to invite an author who's on tour to dinner because they're starved of home-cooked food.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Okay, she adores puns and loves a funky spec. She's a human dose of sunshine. She's Alice, 4 times best-selling cookbook author and the host of the hit ABC TV show A Bite to Eat with Alice. From growing up at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, and we've got that in common too, she's from Georgia, to immigrating to Australia. Alice's family in her kitchen is at the heart of all she does. You know, we've just welcomed her, so very, very happy to be sitting up here. I read in my research, late night research and early morning research as well, I read that you didn't have any English language when you came. I was the same.
How old were you, Ben? How old were you, Cheryl?
I would have been about 5 or 6.
Same, yes. So that is so interesting.
Talk to me about that.
It was 1991.
Wow.
The Cold War had ended. It was the last gasps of the Soviet Union. Perestroika. My family is Ashkenazi Jewish. The reason that we survived the Holocaust was because we were in Georgia. Everyone who stayed in Ukraine, Lithuania and Russia were killed. So we had several generations of people with swiftly packed suitcases. And in 1991, we joined as the next generation to do that. My parents were around the age that I am now. You know, in fact, they were younger. My mum was 36. To pick up with 2 young kids and come to a country on the other side of the world, having to leave everything behind and start again with a new language is just something that I so admire now, being in that same kind of age range. And we landed in Bondi, as a lot of the Soviet Jewry did and a lot of migrants do. And I recall the kindness of the Sydney community. I recall the smell of frangipani on a summer's night. It was October when we landed, walking down Bondi Beach. And I remember so strongly the memory of the piles of hard rubbish on the streets of Bondi, full to the brim with toys and board games that were practically new. And that was the way that I collected some of my fondest kind of toys from my childhood. You know, that felt like that felt like riches to me. It was treasure. And I think that experience has meant that I've never forgotten what it means to be grateful for what you have. You know, I check myself every day that I get to do this for a job. Even that I get to communicate with you, because clearly it's something that I was born to do. I'm a born communicator. I love people. I'm an extroverted extrovert.
I hear you.
Can you tell? That's it. But coming to a country, you know, Georgian was my first language, Russian was my second, English was my third language, and it took me years to learn. And I had to find other ways to communicate and connect with people. And I couldn't, like, that wound of not being able to convey who I am and to become friends with people, I think is part of the reason why I found food, because I would use food to make friends at school. I'd bring an extra roll-up or an extra Dunkaroo.
But isn't that defining when we talk about school lunches? Like, we had, you know, what we call a laffa. So it was, you know, whatever mum had, mortadella on Lebanese bread. And I was mortified. I really, I'd say to mum, there is such a thing as peanut butter sandwiches on white bread. And I would like that.
I would lie.
I didn't want to be different.
This is it. My friends would be like, why are you bringing that to school? And I would say, because I'm allergic to bread.
That's right.
Right? And then one day, Lauren Mansour had this sandwich that I really wanted to try. It wasn't peanut butter. There was something really interesting.
Devon and tomato.
It was something good.
Do you remember Devon and tomato?
Something good. And I said, can I try that? And she said, I thought you were allergic to bread. And I said, only square bread.
I get that. I'll tell you, because food was so important in those days, and, you know, food and culture, and that's another topic we can talk about. But, you know, I grew up, my mum had 6 kids, and she was in a corner shop. We were in Glebe, and she cooked for us every single night. We sat around, you know, and it was things like stuffed vine leaves and course, and wasn't anything simple, tabbouleh, all quite complex. But you'll love this story. One night, a girl at school, Carolyn, her name was, invited me for a sleepover, right? And my mother's like, okay, you're going to go. She really wanted us out there in the world. And Carolyn's mother picked us up from school and asked me what I would like to eat for dinner. And I just said chicken soup. I don't know why I said that, but my mother used to just make the most beautiful chicken soup, right? Anyway, we went to this big old house in Glebe, and we sat around this big mahogany table, and there was only 4 or 5 of us, and she served chicken noodle soup from a packet, right? And I couldn't recognise it, right? So I couldn't eat it. I'd never known what those little square things were, right? So I started crying, and she got up and rang my mother, right, and said, Cheryl won't eat, she's very upset, the dinner, she can't eat the dinner. And my mother said, put her on the phone. And I got the biggest lecture of my life to be hospitable and to go back and sit at the table and eat that dinner, and I did. But there was no chicken in it.
Probably vegan.
It could have been back then. But those things were such culture shock to me, like eating fish that wasn't whole fish was such a shock to me. Once somebody served me like a fish finger and I didn't know what that was, right? Because my father used to go to Sydney markets and get fish in the boxes. Yeah. Did you have those sorts of experiences? Well, I mean, you came later than me, so it might have been a lot different. But you do have that clash of cultures in terms of food, don't you?
Even thinking about, because what year would that have been? Sort of the...
Well, it might have been 70s.
70s.
Yes.
Olive oil, which
is
just like Lebanese food.
Yes.
You need olive oil.
Yeah.
You would have had to go to the chemist for that.
Yeah. No, we would have gone to a Lebanese grocery in Bankstown. But there were just those clashes all the time. And I really struggled with that, food and identity, for a long time. I really did. The other thing was we were wearing this isn't food related, but we were wearing maroon cardigans. And my mother would knit 6 maroon cardigans every year, right? But I didn't want that. It was because it had all the fancy knitwork. I wanted the machine cardigan just like everybody else, you know. So I used to try and do a swap at school. But I said to Mum one day, you have to stop knitting. We don't want that.
You were the Lebanese Von Traps. And thinking about identity, even the fact that we arrived both so young meant that we could change our names. So what is your birth name?
It's very close. It is Shar. It's Cheryl. So Cheryl Akle, A-K-L-E. So it's very close. But my father's brother had been here with his family, and they had... It's actually, our cousins in Lebanon spell it A-K-L-E-H. But it's very close. It hasn't... Has yours changed?
Ooh. My birth name is Alice Zaslavsky.
Yeah.
And people struggle with Zaslavsky, so it's just like, I think, but in that, there's something about being named something, knowing that that's your name, and then being called something else by the general populace. It's
right.
a very interesting kind of
But
choice.
also too, and you would have had this feeling of trying to belong all the time. I really wanted to be like everybody else. And for a while then I wanted to be called Belinda Brown. So I used to practice signing Belinda Brown, and Belinda had long blonde hair. I never quite got there.
No. Can you imagine Belinda Brown, founder of Better Reading? No. But there's something about being an outsider, I think, that means when you're on the outside looking in, you notice things that others don't. And that's the superpower, I think, of coming to a new place. It's just, it takes a while to recognise that that's something that you can hold. I think that sense of belonging, especially for children who, biologically they're seeking safety, the safety of belonging. It's very difficult to come into a place without the language, with a completely different culture at home, and feel like, what place do I have here?
I'll tell you one more food story, and then I want to ask you about your first cookbook. But at one point, because none of us spoke English, right, in the household, and we were making... it was called apple snow at school. This is primary school, right? And there was an apple snow thing. And so they sent a list home of what you needed to bring, right? But my sisters had to get the dictionary out to work it out, right? And so I had to get all these things. I remember being so nervous and trying to get it right and whatever, and then showed up at school with what I had to bring. And the only thing they got wrong was they gave me a chopping board rather than a tray. But that's pretty close, right? If you're looking it up in a dictionary, it must, And I remember making this apple snow and taking it home, and my mother said, "That's not edible." So, it's
Where's
Australian, Mum. It's Australian, Mum.
I've got that experience, because for me, all of those Aussie kind of foods that many of you would have grown up with, that's exotic to me. Tuna mornay is very exotic.
That's
and
right.
I've got a home economist who I've worked with.
I like tuna mornay.
Oh, well, same. Because I didn't grow up, dreading it or, thinking the bechamel was gloopy. It's really fun and different. And that's just so... I've got a home economist called Jane Grills who grew up in Castlemaine. So she's from the country, she says. And she, she went to wool school. She's sort of in her mid to late 50s. And she's like my interpreter. She's a CWA style cook. She was a kitchen garden specialist in Castlemaine, and Jane's the one who I can lean on to explain to me how to make a really great tuna mornay. And then I say, oh, but why wouldn't you add more garlic, or why wouldn't you add, so my tuna mornay with PG paste that I made for Virginia Trioli on A Bite to Eat. There we go. Wow. See, Virginia's had her moment on this stage. It came through because Jane brought the kind of basics of a really great roux and a really good bechamel, and I brought the PG paste because otherwise it's kind of stodgy, right?
And you need flavour.
You need flavour, and the flavour cuts through, and it's something, I think it's not just something that comes to you in childhood, it's something that comes through you, into you, in utero, all of those flavours. And that's why the first opportunity we have to expose our children to foods is while we're pregnant. And some people say, it's the last time that they'll eat everything you give them. But but that's something that I really say to, a lot of my friends who have young children or are pregnant will say to me, Alice, how do you encourage, we've got a 6-year-old who we can talk about, we'll put the pin in that conversation, but how does Hazel eat the way that she does? And I say, because I was very intentional from pregnancy. And I learned that from Nigella Lawson, because I was on stage with her at Hamer Hall, and I was 8 months pregnant, and we were talking about her experience with her children, and she said that when she was pregnant with her daughter, she had read somewhere that whatever you eat, they will eat, and so she just loaded up on broccoli. And she said her daughter, who's like in her 20s now, still loves broccoli.
Love that.
So I just absorbed that and ate my weight in everything green and bitter.
Now, I'm just going to talk about...
Did you write questions, Cheryl?
No, I just did dot points.
Oh, good. Oh, I love it.
I don't do questions. If you've listened to my podcast, often authors email me and say, where are the questions? And I'll say, I'll ask you on the day. Okay, all right. So, but I do want to go, because I wouldn't have remembered the 4 titles, so I've written them here. In Praise of Veg. Now, I must confess, when that book came out, I just thought, who needs another vegetable cookbook? I mean, seriously, there are thousands. And what differentiates one from the other? And do you know what I thought back then, and I still think it, and I think this with your new book as well, flavour is the essence, but I think energy and culture comes out in a book. So In Praise of Veg was really you in that veg cookbook, and I think that's the reason it's been so successful. Congratulations.
Thank you, Cheryl. Yeah. Thank you. I'm really glad that that's what you thought, because that's what my publisher thought too when I pitched the idea to her. I remember distinctly the conversation where I said, I want to write a book about vegetables. And the reason why I wanted to write a book about vegetables is because I had been working on a toolkit for schools called Phenomenon, and it's 100% free. Tell everyone you know, teachers and parents and grandparents, Phenomenon with an M.
Yeah.
And there's podcasts, there's video, there's lesson plans. It is rich with resources. And what we got from the research on the other end, we did a lot of kind of qual and quant and fancy words, because it's all funded by the growers of fresh produce in Australia. So that's why it's all free. But the growers needed to see that there was some ROI, some return on investment. They've invested sort of around about $1.8 million in this program, right?
Yeah, wow.
So we needed to prove to them that it worked.
Yeah.
75% of the children who went through this program were willing to try a new vegetable. Something as challenging as mushrooms, they were in. But the problem was that if the kids go home and their parents serve up the vegetables in the same way that they always have, in the same way that they were fed them when they were kids, overboiled, under-seasoned, you've led that horse to water, but the water there is murky.
Seriously, when you look at some of those plates, you just know that why kids aren't eating their peas, because they're now like yellow and not even green. We were eating, our vegetables were babaganoush.
That's it.
Yeah.
There's a defeatist attitude that had been permeating through the way that vegetables were served up to children. Yes. And so I said to my publisher, I want to write a reference book about vegetables with recipes, kind of more like serving suggestions in Praise of Veg. And she said, there's enough of those. What is going to make this one different? And I said, I am.
Oh, that's so true. Absolutely.
Thank you. And I did. I think there are things in there. Number one, from all the learnings of what the barriers to entry were for each of the vegetables, I was really conscious of that with each. It's organised by colour, which was also, it was the first. The reason I did that is because I wanted it to be translatable. If it's A to Z, you can't send it to the Netherlands. But if it's...
and it has been translated.
It has 7 different languages now, and counting.
Yeah.
Thank you. Including Korean.
Wow.
And they chose the broccoli for the cover. So
yeah. Wow. So the next book, The Joy of Better Cooking.
Well, Joy came about because I was going to a lot of writers' festivals and meeting a lot of readers who had In Praise of Veg at home on their bookshelf, but they were waiting until they were a better cook before they used it. And I needed to give them the keys to the car in order to be able to actually use that book. And mostly the keys to that car are little kind of all the assumed knowledge that cooks glean when they are, or people glean when they're cooking from a young age. And unfortunately, that just doesn't happen as much anymore. But the other thing that I hope the Joy of Better Cooking gives to the cooks who pick it up is that I remind you that you are a better cook than you think you are. And the only difference between a great cook and someone who's still waiting to get there is that that great cook has had the flying hours and the permission slip to just get in there and cook. You know, you can't expect to fly a plane and land it perfectly if you have never done some practice flights.
Do you know what I think too? I think there's a fallacy out there that people think that you and I, we just cook and we never look at a cookbook and we make something up every night. Well, that's just not me. I don't know about you, but I read so many cookbooks. If I've got somebody over for dinner and I'm still got the books, I haven't really transitioned to apps or anything else. But I will read so much before I come up with a menu plan. And I follow a recipe until it becomes my own, right? And that's how you learn. Like my brother asked for Japanese milk rolls, right? And I'd never made them, but I do like baking. 3 attempts later until I got it. But it's practice, you know, like we're practicing, we're reading recipes. It's really learning and practicing, which makes you then like you.
And, well, I fail all the time.
Yeah.
We fail. Like, I have not told this story. Do you want to hear a story?
Yes.
Of an epic fail
Yeah.
behind the scenes on A Bite to Eat with Alice to the worst guest to have ever happened for this to happen to? No cameras, because I don't know if I'm allowed to tell this story.
Okay, no one's recording, hope.
Maggie Beer
Oh, wow.
comes into my kitchen. And before she'd arrived, you know, we've got this amazing food team who are behind the scenes preparing everything that needs to go at different stages so that it's like here's one I prepared earlier. That morning, one of them had slept in. And so she was going to come early and make sure the cakes were in the oven, etc. She sleeps in. So the food producer has to rush into the studio, bake this cake, puts the cake in the oven. I walk onto set to film the first segment before Maggie gets there, and I'm like, what's burning? While the oven had been cleaned, the art assist had flicked the knob up to 220 degrees for an upside-down pear cake.
Oh, no.
So, of course, the sugar burns, the cake is inedible, they have to start again. Then they're baking it in the outside. I love your faces, thank you. This story, it's so worth it. I wish I could tell. One day, it'll be in my memoir. So, Maggie comes in, she's telling me about how on The Cook and the Chef they never had retakes because they just wanted the mistakes to happen, you know, let it happen. And I'm like, I know, Maggie, it happens all the time. We want people to have the confidence to see that even we make these mistakes and it's fine.
Yeah.
So, but Maggie bakes this beautiful upside-down pear cake. I'm so excited. I get it out of the oven, I flip it over, I'm tapping on it and letting it come out golden and glossy, and it's stuck in the tin. So I know, no, that's not the end of the story. So it's stuck in the tin. And I'm like, that's okay. We'll give it a tap. It'll come right out. Stuck in the tin, give it a tap, comes right out, burnt to a crisp, burnt. And Maggie's like, this is fine. And I said, you know what? I reckon we just put this to air. I want people to see that these mistakes happen. And Maggie was like, no, I agree. And they said, okay, look, let's just do a little retake and we'll see what we can do. You know, we'll see if we'll choose on the day. We'll see what's better for the story. What's better for the story.
Yeah.
So then, thankfully, they had a spare cake. They bring the spare cake. I turn it out. It is golden and glossy and gorgeous, like the best cake you've ever seen. And I think, wow, look at this. And Maggie and I have a laugh about it. And I think, I wonder how they're going to make this work. I watched the episode and turn it out, lift it up, gorgeous and glossy and perfect, like nothing had ever happened in the edit, you know? And here's the thing. That is a lie. Yeah. That is a blatant lie. And I think part of the reason why we are in this position as home cooks is that television and social media and magazines and cookbooks never admit to all the tips and tricks and hours that also went into and mistakes that went into it. So I'm admitting it to you here today and telling you that what Maggie and I did in that moment is we laughed our heads off. And so the next time that happens to you, because it will and it'll happen to me, laugh it off and know that that is the playfulness of the kitchen. These things happen, and what a story to tell.
Yeah, and then just, you know, and if you don't have any cake for dessert, just pull out the ice cream. Yeah. This is what I do. Pull out the ice cream, get some salted nuts, sprinkle some salted nuts and some bought chocolate sauce. Have you done that? Emergency desserts.
I went round to Claudia Roden's place.
Oh.
Have you interviewed Claudia?
No, and I wish. I mean, idol. Yeah.
Claudia's books. So she wrote the book of Middle Eastern cooking in like the 60s when her family were exiled out of Egypt. Yeah. She's based in London. I went to her place. Oh. She was hungover because she'd had Nigella and Yotam over the night before. Well, these people. And then she served up store-bought delicious biscuits from Fortnum and Mason. Yeah, yum. Strawberries and cream that she'd whipped. And that was it. And it was so delightful just to have a cup of tea and some strawberries and cream and these biscuits. So, you know, give yourself permission to not have to do everything yourself. Rely on the beautiful artisanal produce. You know, I went to the farmer's market this morning in Patonga.
Is that why you were late?
Oh, yes. Yeah. No, I'll tell you, because once again,
I think that's a good reason.
I love it. I thought it started at 10:30 and I thought I needed to be there half an hour before. So, and it starts at 10. But in Patonga, there was like a queue snaking around the room of people waiting for their fresh produce. I saw on the side so many beautiful little, you know, tidbits, little chili oils and condiments and chippies and things that you can use to bulk out what it is that you make at home as well. And the reason I was late is because then we went to my friend's place in Patonga and I fried up some potatoes for breakfast because I thought I had all the time in the world and I was just like getting lost in the steam and and the smell. And
it's amazing you even got here.
Yeah, I know. And
I would have stayed there.
He's got toddler twins, ginger toddler twins. And he said, I'll pick you up and we can do this as long as you take one on, because his wife was away. And so I'm like suddenly this like stand-in and the children are reaching for me with their snotty noses and they're like grabbing and they're walking along and they're biting into an apple on the way and biting into a purple carrot. It was just such a scene. It felt like such a lovely... I didn't feel like I was travelling. I felt like I was home. So it was a beautiful way to start my day. Albeit also could have been a terrible way for you to start yours.
That's why I like staying at Michelle Wheeler's. The food is good there as well. That's right. Next book was Alice's Food A to Z. So you did do an A to Z. And
that was my first one, Cheryl.
Oh, that's your first one. Yeah. Oh, there you go.
But I think that's a good place to talk about it. Can we?
Yeah.
You cool
absolutely,
with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go on. Tell me about it.
That one came out 10 years ago. It was my first cookbook, Alice's Food A to Z. It's a little skinny tome and it's a textbook for kids.
Did you self-publish?
No, Walker Books.
Oh, Walker Books.
So Walker, who are like Candlewick Press, amazing children's publisher, Where's Wally, Miffy, big dogs.
Yeah.
I had just, and a lot of people don't know this, but I was on MasterChef Australia like 13 years ago. It's a long time ago.
I read that. Yeah,
crazy.
I wanted to talk to you about that.
We can put a pin in that. Have we got time? How are we going?
Yeah, no, we're good. We've got half an hour.
We can talk for 2 hours. But I had been on the show. I was a teacher beforehand. Been on the show, and when they ask you what your thing that you're doing now is, I'm writing a book about food for kids, because it made sense. I was a middle school English, history, geography teacher. I'd always found ways to integrate food and culture and history into my lessons. I wanted to do that more explicitly. And so I get an email in my inbox from Sue Whiting, who is herself a fantastic children's book author and publisher. And Sue had seen this little last strip. She'd been watching me the whole season. And she said, have you got a publisher? And how far into the book are you? I had an idea that I wanted to write this book, and I definitely didn't have a publisher, and it was incredible to think that, you know, just by putting myself out there and saying the thing that I wanted, that came to pass. You know, obviously then I spent another 3 years researching it and writing it, and when it came out in 2015, I distinctly remember crickets. Because there was nowhere to put a children's book about food. They didn't know whether it needed to go in non-fiction, in the cooking, in the kids' picture book. There was no kids' cooking section. And to think that in a decade now I walk into a bookshop and there is a dedicated section of non-fiction or fact books in general. I think non-fiction for kids, particularly those illustrated fact books, are really having a moment. But especially food cookbooks for kids, designed for kids, because we recognise that you can't wait until they're teenagers before you connect them with food. And the easiest way to encourage your children and grandchildren to try new things in the kitchen is to expose them to the fun facts and funky stories, poo-wee bum fart, of food.
I like that. It's fantastic, right? Yeah, and keep exposing them. Okay, so I want to move on to salad for days. This is wonderful, and again, what it oozes is flavour and your personality. And I've got to say, I've always had a strained relationship with salad. I have, yeah. We haven't been great friends over the years because I wouldn't have categorised any of these as salads. So I had this idea that, just a lettuce mesclun salad with vinaigrette. No, that's not for me. I can't just eat that. I went to a restaurant once and that was what a person ordered for their main. I thought, I can't be friends with him. Yeah, that's not going to happen. If you're eating lettuce as a main meal for lunch, that's
Were they a rabbit?
Yeah, right. And so that's not that. But, this is it again, talking about categories and categories in bookshops. And the way we like to categorise things just doesn't work. No. It's not the way it is. Yeah. This is really, they're all main meals. Yes. They're really wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, talk about that and how that came about.
I think our relationship to salad, the Simpsons have a lot to answer for.
Yeah.
Because in the 90s, when there was that episode where Homer and Bart are singing to Lisa, you don't win friends with salad, you don't win friends with salad, that runs through people's heads to this day. Whereas there are people like Yotam Ottolenghi, Hetty McKinnon.
Yes.
I would like to think this fits in the category of people saying that it's time to reframe what we even think of as salad.
Absolutely.
And to me, a few ingredients tossed together with some kind of dressing to bring it together, that's a salad. And yes, some of them, a lot of them can be main meals, and I offer suggestions of how to bulk them out. But I want you to think about family style eating always. Don't worry about serving things out onto plates. Family style eating, which also means that you can sit down sooner because people can serve themselves. And also because it means that people can find the thing that they love the most and they can eat more of it. There's less attachment when there's not just one thing on the table. And the way that we grew up, so in Georgia, our food, being at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, means that we've got the spices of the spice trail. Particularly, there's a lot of alignment with Indian spicing in Georgia and Middle Eastern, obviously, and also the fresh herbs of Southeast Asia. And then the kind of flavour profiles that you're thinking of are quite Middle Eastern, actually. So, eggplant, garlic, walnuts, lots of tahini, lots of oil, but the oil that Georgians would use would be sunflower oil rather than olive oil, just because that's what we would have access to. And the way that we would eat, breakfast, lunch and dinner, would be small plates, lots of small plates. And each of those, there's not really actually a word for it in Georgian for one of those plates. It's just that all of those would make a supra, which is just, it's a spread. And so each meal felt like a feast, and it was okay if you only ate half the baba ganoush, or badrijani as we would call it, and then ate the rest of it for dinner. We start our day with salad. There's salad on the table at breakfast. It's called a breakfast salad. It's in the book as the relaxed chopped salad. And tomatoes, cucumbers, capsicum, maybe some Spanish onion if you don't have a breakfast meeting, and some kind of fresh soft herb, if it's dill or parsley, whatever you've got, coriander if you're that way inclined, and together with some lemon juice, a bit of olive oil. That on the table is a game changer. Because once you get on the veg train, and once you find yourself veg-spired, she loves a pun, what you'll find is that the way that you feel changes. Yep. The way that you think about food changes. What I mean by the way that you feel changes is that when we start our day with brown and white foods, our bodies feel stodgy and heavy and tired. When you start your day with colour, suddenly you vibrate with life. You are reanimated through the vibration of that fresh produce. That's what salad can give you. And when I talk about changing the way that you think about veg on the table, what I mean by that is that when I think about what's on my table every day, I start with the veg. I don't say, oh, we're having lamb for dinner. I say we're having pumpkin. I've got some sweet potato. Oh, okay, and then what protein have we got left over? And it might just be a little bit less of it. But we actually don't need as much animal protein as we've been buying and eating. And in this time of cosy lives, you know, that's expensive. Whereas veg, relatively, when it's in season especially, it's very cost effective. It's full of flavour. You just need to know what to do with it.
I'm going to ask you a very personal question.
Cool.
You up for it? You know, in households where you've got, say, for instance, a painter or an architect or a builder, and yeah, you know where I'm going. So the painter's house always needs painting and never gets done because they're not going to pay for a painter to do it, but he's not going to do it anyway. Yes, if you've got a carpenter, those kitchen cupboards needed replacing 20 years ago. Do you think you're the same?
Cheryl! Look, I think, okay, what I will say, that I'm really glad...
Are you producing great meals every night?
I'm really glad you asked me that because, you know, in the spirit of full disclosure, I would say I'm really lucky that what I love to do is also what I do for my work. And that comes, I'm lucky but also unlucky because the way that I relax is cooking, the way that I work is cooking, and so sometimes I work myself into a food fatigue state where I can't look at ingredients anymore. I can't think what to make for dinner. So in those moments, I am just like you, and I can totally have those moments where I can't be bothered cooking, and there are two things that will happen. Number one, I've got some go-to meals that I know are just so easy I could just make them on autopilot, and actually there's a chapter in The Joy of Better Cooking called On Autopilot where quite a few of those are my autopilot dishes. The other thing that I have at my disposal is my husband, who is a recipe follower and a lover of food. So I can send him a Guardian column that I've written and say,
make this tonight.
Make the spinach hand pies.
Oh,
or
wow.
make, you know, he's got a few that he particularly loves to make from my Guardian columns. If you're not already following it, it's free. You don't have to subscribe to the Guardian. It's a nice little tidbit. You know, if that's the only thing that I gift you today, it's called You've Got This, and it's just literally midweek meals. And that's actually the next book that I'm writing is Midweekers.
Oh, wow.
I've just jumped ahead. But
you've just heard that right here.
You're right here.
Exclusive.
You've heard so many
Yay.
new things. Because you know, I'm clearly, Benny, I haven't had time to work up my game face for a writers' festival because I only found out I was here on Tuesday. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to hang out with my friends. But I wanted to write a book for people like me who love to eat but don't always love to cook. You know, because it does happen. It does happen because we are busy and tired, and when our bandwidth is stretched, things fall by the wayside. But we work together as a team. We've got a very hungry 6-year-old, and she needs to be fed. And there are certain meals that we know she's going to love. One of them is from this season of A Bite to Eat. It's Jenny Lee's, so it's Elizabeth Chong's mother's macaroni soup.
Oh, yum.
Hazel could have that. In fact, at the moment she's having it once a week because I'm trying to make a my version for the next book. And so she loves it. It's a chicken soup base with some...
And chicken in it?
Well, so Elizabeth actually, she fries off pork mince. But I'm going to try it again next week with chicken mince to see if, you know, that way it's got some chicken in it. And then rather than noodles, she just uses store-bought macaroni. And because I've got my husband's gluten intolerant, so I buy a gluten-free, casarecce from the freezer aisle. Arda is the brand. I don't know if you get it in New South Wales, but if you do, it's excellent. But any kind of fresh pasta from the shops or dry into that soup with lettuce, shredded lettuce, and I do some bok choy as well on the side, and a bit of sesame oil, white pepper. So easy. On the table, 20 minutes, easy peasy. You'll find it if you just search Alice, A Bite to Eat, or just search Alice and A Bite to Eat. All of the recipes are on, you know what, don't even search it, alice.recipes, and then search Jenny, I think, in the search of the recipes. So I think that'll get you there. If it doesn't, just email me and I'll send you the link. Gosh.
Do you know one of the greatest... when I was in my 20s, and again, I'm older than you, but we were all cooking restaurant-style meals at home.
Yeah.
So I would be making like a souffle, like an entree and a main and whatever. And I remember a friend of mine came over for dinner and he said to me, you know what, Cheryl, if I wanted to eat restaurant food, I'd go to a restaurant. So why aren't we just making home-cooked meal? Do you know, that was a light bulb moment for me, and that was it. From then on, it was just in the middle, help yourself.
But you know, it's because for a while there, the notion of a celebrity chef and the cookbooks that we were buying were celebrity chef cookbooks.
Well, I used to love Marco Pierre White
Marco.
back then. Yeah. I don't know whether you're allowed to love him anymore, but anyway.
But you know, Marco's cooking is for a restaurant kitchen.
Exactly.
And that's why chefs are excellent at what they do. You know, for the first time in a million years, Matt Preston twisted my arm and got me to cook at a big gala charity dinner for 350 people. Ordinarily, I cop out and say, I'll host it. Easy. But this time I cooked and I needed to scale my roasted beetroot salad for 350 people.
Oh, God.
That is not my skill set. That is not something that I can do. I can create the flavours, but not serve them out to 350. So I called on my food producer from A Bite to Eat, who's been a restaurant chef for a million years, and Lisa helped me scale the dish, 50 kilograms of beetroot, 2 litres of olive oil, 10 litres of yogurt to make the labna. It was wild to me, but there were things that I understood and knew that she didn't, and vice versa. And I think we can learn a lot from restaurant chefs, but they can learn a lot from us too. So it kind of goes both ways.
Hey, I just want to touch a little bit on labna and, recipes for that kind of travel through the ages, if you like, or the generations. So my mother, she made everything from scratch. And I was only telling my friend this story this morning. She makes yogurt from scratch. She made yogurt and, we'd never, ever had store-bought yogurt. And back then, Greek-style yogurt didn't even exist, right? But the thing I'm getting to here is that when she made the yogurt, so you have to get it to 85 degrees, so it would be her finger, and then you have to let it drop to 45, and it would be her finger, and then she would add it, and then she'd wrap it in a blanket and put it under the bed. And then the next morning, it's yogurt, right? And then she would get a calico bag out, and she would strain it, and then it becomes labna. So I decided this year I'm going to do that, right? I'm going to start making yogurt, and I'm going to do the finger in the dipping method. It just never worked. It was soft every time. So I bought a thermometer and then success every single time. And I thought, is something wrong with my fingers? Or did they knew? Our parents, and you probably had this experience yourself, they just could cook under any circumstance.
That's the flying hours. That's
my mother wouldn't have even known there was a thermometer.
Yep. She probably wouldn't. Well, I think that's the thing. She had the flying hours. She would have had her mother say, here, put your finger in this. That's what you should be feeling. And when I cook with my mum, she's not a recipe follower, and I'll say, how do you know it's ready? And she says, it just is, That's not helpful. But that's why, I think of what I do as knowledge work because I am trying to convey knowledge. Some of it is just oral history in a way that can be interpreted by someone at home. And probably the most meaningful feedback that I've had in the last month about what I do was at a writers' festival in Trentham, Spudfest. Actually, it was a potato festival.
My kind of festival.
Yeah, I know. And I had a woman come to me at the end of when we were signing, and she said, I want to thank you. My father is in his 70s and he's only just started to learn to cook because my mum has dementia. And so he has to do the cooking now. And normally for recipes, I have to translate them for Dad, but I don't have to do that with yours.
Oh, wow.
And thank you. We just both wept, because that's exactly right. Like I believe that anyone can cook, and I believe that everyone deserves the opportunity to do so. And I think for a little while there, it's done now. We're over that phase, but for a little while there was this exclusionary nature in the way that the recipes were written, and you don't have a sous vide machine, so sucks to be you. And that time is gone. If you need a thermometer to make labna, great. If you've got a Thermomix to make labna or yogurt, great. If you're still using the blanket method, like Mum sewed me, she took my old little fleece blanket, from Georgia and sewed me a little insulation blanket to make yogurt.
Oh, wow.
Right? So I've got a Thermomix, but I'm definitely using the blanket.
I use the blanket, definitely. I didn't know you could do it in the Thermomix.
Yeah.
I want to talk about that too, like, food and, what it brings to us in terms of culture, but also what it reminds us of. And it kind of is a sense of place. I have a friend who moved to the US, right? And he's an Australian that lives over there. He's been there for 20 years. His mother was the best baker in terms of baking cakes, like custard tarts, bread and butter pudding, all that sort of stuff. And so when I go over there, because I live in San Francisco for 3 months of every year, and so when I go over there, there's always a list of requests that he'd like. And the first one is usually bread and butter pudding or custard tart or whatever. And I look at him eating it, and it's not just about the dish and the flavour. I think it takes him back to his homeland. And I love that. And people don't associate those kinds of things with homeland. They think it should be exotic. But bread and butter pudding or a custard tart or a scone is homeland.
And there's a very good reason why food is so entwined with memory, and that's because our hippocampus, which is where our memories are stored, is adjacent to our olfactory system, as in what processes our smells and tastes. And that's biological. There's a reason for that, because back in caveman times, in order to pattern recognise that, I better not eat this berry because the last time I ate it, it gave me the runs. Like, you want that information really fast. So we can recognise that too, and we can kind of create these little Easter eggs for the next generation, but also we can recognise that for ourselves. What is your comfort food, and where does it take you? And what is your discomfort food, and where does that take you? And is it time to realign that? Because if, say, peas. So I don't know if any of you saw Andrew Gaze on A Bite to Eat. He's a 6'7" grown man. He's 62 years old, one of Australia's best known, best loved basketballers. Can't stand peas. Like inordinately can't stand peas. To the point where when I said we're going to cook with peas, he went to leave the room.
Oh, wow. I'm out of here.
I'm out of here. I said, look, Andrew, we're going to cook meat pies, because I know you love meat pies, and that's for you, but just for me, and also for those at home who want to see how to make really great peas, I'm going to make these peas, and you don't have to try them.
It's a great side dish, though, with a meat
pie. Oh, my good. Smoky,
homeland.
Bacon, butter, frozen peas. Delicious. And at the end, when it was time to taste, I said, Andrew, you don't have to taste these if you don't want to. And he's like, no, I'll taste it. I literally just put 4 peas on his plate, just in case, and that's what you should do, especially if you've got sort of, food averse kids, grandkids, people, like grown adult people in your care. You don't put a big mound, because that's intimidating and scary and a barrier. Just tiny tastes. We know that works. And then Andrew put the pea in his mouth, and he did this, and I could see the pain on his face, and he was like, nah. And that was fine. That was so fine, because clearly we didn't have the time to go into it, and I would have had to send him my bill, but there is a lot of work that needs to be done to unpick whatever happened to Andrew with those peas, right?
They were overboiled peas probably every night of the week. Now, are we meant to do questions? Yeah, I've got a little wave. Okay, anybody have some questions? The lovely... Oh, great.
Oh, here we go.
Benny's going to...
I'm going to come down, and then you... There we go.
Thank you. What a joyful conversation. Can I ask you if you're willing to share bring a plate, maybe story, and hopefully not too terrifying for you both?
Can I share, that salad, I'm really smug about it now, that beetroot salad that I made for the 350 people, it's very scalable, I know that now, but it's also very bringable, very bappable. And so because maybe a month ago, Danny Valent, amazing food writer, restaurant critic and cook in her own right, was on the Mornington Peninsula, which is where we split our time as well, and she invited us over for dinner. Like that night, she said, everyone's bringing a plate, and I was like, oh no. I just happened to be at the sort of farm gate, and so I grabbed some baby beets, and I grabbed a tub of yoghurt, and I went home, and some mint and dill. And I went home and I hung the... I think hung is the right word, we'll go with that. Hung the yoghurt in some cheesecloth and
over the bathtub by Bobby.
Not over the bathtub, just in a chinois or like in a sieve, and in the fridge for as long as possible just before we left. So much whey had come away, and it was like a soft cheese. That's what labne is, yep, or matsoni as we call it, and just kind of a pinch of salt in that. Picked the herbs into a salad spinner with water so that they're nice and fresh and washed as well. Spun them just before we left into a takeaway container. Separated. Dressing in a jar with a lid. The dressing was pomegranate molasses, which you definitely have in the pantry from the last time you cooked something from an Ottolenghi book. So pomegranate molasses, olive oil and orange juice. Shaky, shaky, shaky. And then that's the dressing. Oh, obviously salt and pepper. Then tasty, tasty. It needs to be tangy, sweet, and the emulsification of the shaky, shaky means that it's nice and creamy as well. And the beetroots I roasted in a muffin tin, one each, just like oiled them up, just washed them, unpeeled, one beetroot in every tin, foil it over as one foil tray, into the oven at 190 fan for an hour, or let's say 45 if they're baby beets. When they come out, they are so jammy and so soft, the skins slip straight off, and then I cut that up before I left, tossed it in the dressing so that it had time to soak it up, and then, kept a little bit of dressing for drizzling over, and left the house. Boom. Actually, there was one more thing. I pickled some onions, but that's like you can have it or you cannot, and that's literally...
my new favourite thing is pickling onions.
Quickling we call it. So it's just
easy.
Spanish onion, finely sliced with the grain of the onion, kind of on a bit of an angle, and then white wine vinegar, sugar, salt.
Water, yeah.
Leave it. The anthocyanin in the onion soaks into the rest of the mix.
It takes them to another level.
Another level. And it's like a little bitey little pop of flavour, pop of sweetness, piquancy. It's yummy. That is the best bring a plate. And if you can't remember how to do it, I shared it in a newsletter recently, and I'm going to pop it on my website, alice.recipes, but I shared like my reflections on it and the hack with the muffin tin on my Instagram. So if you're Instagram people, which I can tell some of you are, I see your faces, I just go to Alice in Frames, because she loves a pun.
Okay, do we have time for another question? Yep.
Yay.
Okay.
Nice and close. Alice, I saw on the TV on one of those wonderful cooking shows, might even be in yours, I'm not sure, there was a beautiful meat, slow-cooked beef dish with orange zest and the lovely Pernod that I wouldn't drink normally, but in cooking it can be wonderful. And I myself often use white wine with chicken and things like that. Is there any chance of a book on cooking with alcohol? Because it can be
Cooking
so
with
flavoursome.
booze! Oh, I
don't even think there is one. Is there one? Have you ever seen one?
If there was, I would call it... I would just call
that.
it...
I like that. Drink
Yeah, I
a
love
glass
it. Yeah,
and
yeah.
then use the rest in the
Yeah.
recipe.
I think it would just be
Yeah.
Floyd on food. I think he
Yeah,
did a lot
yeah,
of
yeah,
drinking
yeah.
with wine.
I love that.
but-
Always pissed.
Yes, that's it.
yeah.
But if you wanted to do that with no booze, I mean, go Pernod, great, but Chinotto. I made it with Chinotto, which is like an Italian bitter cola for Eric Thompson for an episode last week with the orange zest. Oof, delicious.
yum.
Really good, really good.
Yeah. Okay, one more question.
Yes? Oh,
Yeah.
lots. Okay.
There's lots. Okay. I think that's you up there. Oh, great.
With your show, I think it's only half an hour, and I love it, and I hope the ABC renegotiates a new contract. Because I saw the other day you've got 100 that we can still watch, but you were driving away.
They love emails, the ABC. Send them an email.
Yeah.
Just say, I'd love
Okay.
more a bite to eat.
And so each guest comes in and, you've talked to them obviously about what they don't like and so on. And we get to see half an hour. How much of the day has gone into that.
Yep.
And, you know, when you've got something in the oven that says it's got to cook for 40 minutes and you come back 2 minutes later,
Yep.
are they bringing something from
The
the
pod.
other kitchen?
Yeah,
We want a behind the scenes.
It's in the car park. So there's a pod, like a little mobile pod in the car park at the ABC, which is now obviously packed away because it is 100 episodes. For now, you never know. But as I said, if you love the show, then, you know, you're very welcome to tell them that you do because, you know, they love emails. And so what we cook as live in the sense that we don't stop rolling. And we keep talking, we keep having stories, but there's a 45 minutes, sometimes there's a 2-hour dish, you know, that we can't just wait around for. So there's another pod where they've baked it and they have got spreadsheets. They know that at this time we need to have this out. It's about 2.5 hours to film one episode, and we film 3 episodes a day. And it's a long day. I'm up at 5, I'm on set at 7, I don't leave till 7. So they're big days, but what a legacy to get to leave for everyone, that you've got 100 episodes. You know, when I had Maggie in the kitchen, she was sort of saying, you know, people still tell her from 2009, The Cook and the Chef was made, people still tell her what an impact that's had. And it is such a privilege to me, an honour to me when people say the same to me. And I do hope that it's still useful to people in 15 years' time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One more question over here.
Thank you. It really has been a delightful session. Alice, you put a pin on a story about a 6-year-old.
Oh,
Have you got time to just tell that?
what do you want to know?
You were going to tell us something special.
Sure. Okay. So I guess the most important thing that I can impart, because for the last decade and a half, you know, when I was a teacher, all the way through to the food literacy program, all the way through to conversations like this, there's a lot of theory that I've gleaned. I sit on round tables about food literacy, you know, policy, all of it. A lot of it was very theoretical, and it wasn't until I became a parent myself and experienced the journey of curating a relationship for my child very intentionally did I recognise that there are certain things that I almost, you know, had pitfalls that I can now impart. So for example, one of the biggest learnings is that it is a curation. We can choose when and how we serve up the food to our children and grandchildren. We can't force them to eat it. So that idea of parents and grandparents provide, children decide. The less we say and do when the food is on the table, the more likelihood there is that they will want to try it themselves. To the point where I know, like my mum, she would sit next to Hazel and she would say, like she'd put the food down and she'd say, "Kushe, kushe, kushe, kushe," just under her breath, which means eat, 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 eat. And I would say to Mum, "She's eating. I don't know why you're saying that." But it's because I can remember my grandmother saying that to me. You know, there's these little scripts that we've just learned and we need to unlearn them. And it's one thing to, you know, it comes from a place that we want to nourish our children and we want them to have the best. But doing less means that it's actually more likely that they'll want to taste more. And when I say curating, a good example is Hazel with oysters, because this is oyster country. So when Hazy was, like, ever since she was big enough to hold her head up, she would watch us eat. And she got very curious about oysters, because we would just buy a dozen, full of zinc, delicious, zippy, and she wanted to try it. And you look at a little tiny little hand, little palm, a little tiny little mouth, and you give them an oyster. What are they going to do? They're going to choke, they're going to have that association, and they're never going to want an oyster again. So when she was old enough to have a bit of chew, I gave her the muscle of the oyster, which is that sort of the bit that is usually hangs the oyster onto the shell. It's usually scooped off. You can pick that out. And then the rest of the gloopy bit, that would be me, slurping that up. And over time, what that did is it helped her to understand the flavour. That's right, develop the flavour for her. She liked that. She liked the chew. And then eventually she was like, I want to taste the whole thing when she got a little bit bigger. And she'd, "Ooh, this is nice." She's at a point now where it's her job to squeeze out the lemon and squeeze out the lime and crack on the cracked pepper
And I sigh to you because at the moment in Melbourne, oysters are $36 a dozen, right? And if we leave her alone at the table with a dozen oysters, we come back and they're all gone. So
She becomes a very expensive child.
be careful what you wish for. But I think that's a really good example. You know, texture makes just as much of a difference as flavour. And if we think of our children too as aliens arriving on a planet and being given stuff to put in their mouths that they have never experienced before, if you landed on a planet and someone said to you, here, slurp this, and you'd never seen it, you'd never smelt it, it's all very foreign, the first thing you're going to do, you're not going to put it in your mouth, you're going to sniff it, you're going to put it on the bench. Then you're going to pick it up, you're going to give it a little touch, then you're going to put it on the bench. You know what? You might even drop it on the ground just to see what happens. Just to see what happens. And if your alien caretaker is watching that, they might think, oh, they don't want it. No, you're just seeing what happens. And then you might drop it again because the last time the caretaker came over and got it. So you might do it again just to see if they come back again, you know? And then 15 times exposure is what children need on average to try a new food, to want to try a new food. So we just need to keep putting it out there. Doesn't have to be a lot, just a little bit. And it's okay. And you don't even have to say, just try it, which is exactly what I did for Andrew Gaze, a 62-year-old, 6'7" man. I said, you don't have to try the peas, Andrew. He chose to try the peas. He had the agency in that moment, and when he all but spat it out, that wasn't on me. It's fine. I've done my job. I know that they're delicious for me.
You need him to bring him back 12 times.
Well, that's it. I would love it because he was so fun. Like, this man bounces. He doesn't just bounce a ball. He bounces on the balls of his feet. He is so funny. That is a highlight episode for me.
You need to bring your gorgeous daughter to the Central Coast where we have the best oysters
We
at a very good
we
price.
are well overdue for a road trip. So, yes, Benny.
Thank you so much. Please thank our wonderful guest, very short notice. Cheryl, thank you so very much. Thank you. Book signings at the back of the house. And Cheryl, last minute, Alice, last minute. Thank you very much. And thank you
Total
all
pleasure.
for being
Thank
here.
you all for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was